We're not just teaching them art because we want them to have defined knowledge. We're giving them the experience of an art lesson because we want them to grow in so many ways. When I look back on it, I think what art has given me is the ability to show who I was when I felt really quiet and couldn't show who I was in other ways. I love the fact that there's a whole world out there that we as artists can transform, and that, I think, is the empowerment we need to give children.
Hi, and welcome back to Creative Minds Shaping the Future. I'm your host, Emma Palastanga. I'm an educator, author, and now podcast producer, curious to discuss a range of views on creativity and curriculum. In Series 2, we explore creative expression and why it is important for all of us. Paula Briggs is the author of Drawing Projects for Children and Make, Build, Create, Sculpture Projects for Children. She's a determined advocate for the importance of art and art education in all our lives. She studied sculpture at Norwich School of Art and later at the Royal College of Art. Paula is the CEO and Creative Director of AccessArt, which she formed with her colleague Sheila Ceccarelli, and is now a self-sustaining arts organisation, a charity, limited company and subject association, which in 2024 celebrated 25 years of existence. The aim of the charity is to inspire and enable high-quality visual arts teaching, learning and practice. It's now the leading provider of digital visual arts resources in the UK, providing inspiration and ideas to the whole community. Over 18,000 artists, teachers and facilitators use the resource and actively contribute ideas, a creative community, simultaneously the chicken and the egg. The resources support teachers to plan art lessons and provide ideas, inspiration and guidance, inspire and develop practice for artists working in education, facilitators and education officers in a range of settings, as well as for individual artist practice. The values which describe the way AccessArt endeavours to exist also describe how creativity might be allowed to flourish in the world, including the way we enable creativity in ourselves and those around us. It is those values and the importance of the visual arts that we discuss in this episode. So Paula, welcome.
Hello, nice to be here, thank you.
We'll dive straight in, Paula, with why is creative expression important in our schools?
I take it back to myself as a child. I think what I was like as a child in school. And obviously when you're a child in school, you think it's just you that feels a certain way. And I think I felt like I was quite different to the other children in my school, in my class. The one place where I felt really, really comfortable was when I was making things, when I was drawing and picking up materials. And I felt really at home in that space. When it happened in school, I felt like I could relax in school. But a lot of the time I was so overwhelmed by school. I was really overwhelmed by school. So I used to have a lot of time off. I was asthmatic, but I think really I was just very introverted and couldn't handle school very well. So I used to have a lot of time at home. And the thing that I always went back to at home was making. It was the thing that set me to rights. And I think I worry a little bit now that if we cut away that creative space and those opportunities in schools, that those children like me and others just won't have that place in school where they can relax. You know, there's so much learning in school where you're just sitting and you're passively receiving, but we need that space in school for creative exploration. We need space just to not necessarily know the answers, just to be able to explore and do that through a different kind of intelligence than the one that is verbal, taking in information and then regurgitating or understanding it. So that's why we set up our first organisation, Cambridge Sculpture Workshops, because we wanted to make sure that we were giving children that opportunity to make and to express themselves creatively. That was back in 1990. When was it? 1995.
Wow.
I already thought then that children were maybe struggling with the opportunity to make. Little did we know it was going to get even worse. But yeah, it goes back to what I felt like I needed as a child. and wanting to make sure that we give that for lots and lots and lots of reasons, make sure that's available to everybody.
I love the phrase what you said, not knowing the answers. Make something without knowing the answers. And it is that exploration, isn't it, that you talked about, just playing with materials and creating something that's not right or wrong.
Yeah, it can sound a little bit woolly as a lesson. It can sound a bit unfocused, especially when we're kind of stuck in an education system where it feels very much like we need to know what the end point is and then tick and measure. So it can feel a little bit woolly, but I think that's a misunderstanding of the kind of learning that's actually going on in that space. That space when you allow, I'm going to say children, but I mean any age actually. I mean adults as well. But that space when you can just literally let yourself settle and start responding in a different way to the materials, whatever they are, whether it's, three-dimensional or pen, paper, whatever it is. I think there's a lot of fear about the idea of being in a space of not knowing, because being in a space of not knowing sounds terrible, doesn't it? It sounds like we failed.
I think we're so used to, I keep talking about this, but ticking boxes, it's how we feel we have to get through the curriculum. We have to do everything in a certain rushed way. And actually taking that time to slow down and step back, it has to be good for our mental health to have that space and thinking time and calm and tranquility and peace. And why are we so fearful of that? I think we are so, particularly in school, so time pressured actually. And I've written a phrase that I've used many, many times in my podcast actually, but it's about process over product, isn't it? We're not all producing a vase and it must all look like this. And if it doesn't, well, you're below age-related expectations. Actually, we're all producing a vessel that could hold, let's say, some flowers. It's up to you how that might look. And then you open up that world of freedom to children. And when I talk about creativity in this podcast, we talk a lot about imagination. And isn't that a perfect example of where our imagination can be set free?
Yeah, and confidence and empowerment as well. I think one of the characteristics of being human is our ability to think or to act. I don't know which way it would be, symbolically, to understand symbols and to use our imagination. It's the thing that sets us apart. So it just seems so fundamentally wrong that we don't allow ourselves to develop that part of our personality, to express ourselves in those ways and to understand the world in those ways. And I think there are so many ways. I really appreciate the pressures in schools in terms of the timetabling and how short the art lesson might be, and the lack of experience of many teachers that haven't had a good art education themselves. But I think there are lots of ways we can provide a space in an art lesson that is more exploratory than perhaps the other lessons going on in the school. And I think in our experience, that's been one of the big hurdles, is that senior leadership teams often kind of try and impose the same kind of structure on art as a subject or art as a lesson as on other subjects, in terms of, say, measuring or the constraints of the lesson. But the idea that we try and kind of get schools to understand is that if children are going through their day and they're visiting each subject area, and it's always a similar kind of experience, with the exception of some things like the other creative arts and things like PE as well, where you're suddenly moving around. But the art lesson is an opportunity for a completely different way of thinking and learning. So we always kind of see it as a kind of big, a bubble space that's just expansive. And what we're trying to get pupils to do, which actually they generally do fairly easily when they're younger, down in the primary school, what we're trying to get pupils to do and what we're trying to get teachers to understand is that we can actually take the lid off children's thinking. We don't have to put them in a box. We can give them the skills that enables them to think around subject areas or to think around the physical problems that they're working with when they're making sculpture, for example. And literally you can feel the lid being taken off. And that's why we think of it as a cloud space, because it's kind of an amorphous growing space. But, if you've had a rich journey in that space, full of troublesome things as well, because of course they're going to need to practice their resilience, and they're going to practice their skills of being okay in that space of not knowing. But the end result is always fantastic, but it isn't always fantastic in terms of a visual thing to look at. And I think this is something that's interesting with the visual arts in school, that this perception that we're looking at the end result in terms of a visual thing, because we usually have a visual thing. But what's fascinating for us is all the processes that are going on behind that, and the successes behind that, you know, the oracy skills that might have been developed, or the empathy skills, or the feeling of connection because they've seen something across the classroom that they like the idea of, and they might try and use a little bit or connect with what that person's done. And that's why we try and talk a lot to teachers about learning through art as well as learning about art. And I think, again, that goes back to that difference between subject areas. We're not just teaching them art because we want them to have defined knowledge. We're giving them the experience of an art lesson because we want them to grow in so many ways. So for us, it's very holistic as a subject area.
The key thing that popped up to me was learning through art as well as about art. Reminds me of the RE curriculum, where we're learning about religions as well as learning through the religions. And I think that's such a lovely way to look at it. There are, as you said, so many different skills that can be learnt there, and the opportunities just to reflect as well. You were saying about working through troublesome things. I think you were talking about perseverance with the actual art, but actually, isn't it an opportunity if we're bringing negative emotions to safely express those emotions as well?
Yeah.
You know, our children go through so much and they don't always have the words to express what they're feeling or what they're going through. And to provide this space is it's like therapy, isn't it?
It is therapy,
You know?
and it's therapy, and it's also prevention. And if we take it away, and I think that's what we're seeing now, if we take it away, we contribute to a lack of well-being. And I know there's lots of reasons for a lack of well-being in schools at the moment. We're still working through COVID.
Yeah.
And we're not fighting against the digital, but we've got to somehow balance that digital with a physical. Yeah, I think if we take it away, we're seeing the outcome of that. And I think I find it very interesting, again, when I think back to myself as a child, there wasn't as much awareness about different kinds of ways of thinking and the way we interacted with the world. But don't quote me on this, but I read somewhere that the number of children considered highly sensitive, and I imagine this is people as well, but I read it in relation to children, is something like 15 to 20% of our pupil population is considered highly sensitive. And that's what I mean when I said, well, I thought I was the only one at school that felt like that. I couldn't, of course, articulate I was highly sensitive, but I do know that I felt very overwhelmed by stimulus, and that I think about everything so deeply, and everything would affect me a lot. And that's why I think my art space was important to me, because it just let me calm, let me just not even think through. It was act through my body. It's definitely a somatic process.
Yeah.
But for those 15 to 20%, let's say the population, children in school that are highly sensitive, they have a plus side. That's why they're the creative people, I think, because they are highly sensitive to the world. So we are objects, we are people in the world. We take in the world through our senses, and then somehow we process it or don't process it. But if we can process it, it can come out as expression, a healthy expression.
Yes.
So I think those sensitivities of those people, and I'm not saying that the other 80% aren't sensitive enough at all. I think this applies to them as well. But if we don't have a place for our sensitivities to land, I absolutely believe they turn into anxieties. Now, if you've got the kind of mind that takes something on, you feel it in your body and your mind's churning over it and you can't find an outlet, that becomes an anxiety or a rage or something.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think the art space is a space to just be quiet long enough, or not be quiet, maybe move your body dramatically and make a massive drawing, but just be in a different kind of activity where you're not even consciously tuning into your body. But I know in my own practice that I've kind of come back to after a long break, as I think a lot of women do.
Yes.
I just have this sense of returning and appreciating that actually making, and within making, the phrase making, I include drawing and painting and things as well. But making is a real intelligence of the body as well as the hands and the head and the heart.
Yes.
It's a different kind of intelligence. And we're not recognizing that in schools at all. We're really not recognizing that not only is it really valuable because it's a different kind of intelligence, that it's actually therapeutic, as you say, but also preventative if we give the space in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And that's definitely how I feel, that without those expressions of art, drama, music, I'm talking visual arts broadly, and the making and the doing, I think without that, we are at real risk of, I was going to say mental health crisis, but I almost feel like we're there already. But I do feel that it's so important to prevent a worsening of mental health situations in our schools particularly, but yes, wider in society too.
Yeah. And
Sure.
I think it comes back to purpose as well. And it's something that we try and talk to teachers about to help them think what the purpose is behind teaching art in the first place. Because it's not because it's on the national curriculum. It's on the national curriculum because it serves a purpose. It's the other way around.
Yes.
And I think there's no answer to that. There's lots of purposes. There's lots of reasons art serves as well or can serve as well. And obviously that changes over the years. And I think it is up to us to define, and maybe we need to redefine what we need now art to be for us now in this time. What purpose can it best serve for us? Because I don't think that the teaching of art is necessarily about creating more artists, even though I know there's a creative pipeline to be fed, and that's really important and valid. And we need lots of diversity in that pipeline, that's for sure, more than we've got at the moment. So there is that purpose, but there is also the purpose of, as I said before, those things that are going on behind the art lesson, feeling empowered.
Yeah.
An interesting conversation with what AccessArt likes to do a lot is talk to people from all different settings, get excited, cross pollinate between settings. And
Yeah.
so for that reason, we still have lots of conversations with FE and HE and people teaching in art schools, and they get a really good feel, obviously, for the pupils that are coming out of school,
Yes.
ones that do get themselves to art school. But, it's interesting to talk to those lecturers, tutors about how those students have changed a little bit over the last 5-10 years. And interestingly, one lady said that she felt like she'd had very interesting conversations with students on a foundation course, so 1 year exploratory course after A-level before degree. She became aware over the course of the conversation and the work she was doing with them that they didn't quite intuitively understand that art was a way of expressing themselves. And honestly, when she said that, my neck went a little bit cold. I felt a bit tingly because that's so fundamental, isn't it? We just assume that we understand as humans that we can express ourselves through art. And she's been teaching for 30, 40 years. That worried me a lot. I think, well, what are we not providing in schools? What opportunities being missed that some students, and these are the ones that get to art school, didn't necessarily understand they could express themselves through art. That seems pretty fundamental to me.
It does, doesn't it? And I think you're right. You talked earlier about the pedagogy behind art, that it's a whole different feeling in the art classroom to any other, besides the smell of the poster paints and the newspaper coming out to cover the tables. We've got a whole different feeling. And surely, as you said, that should start with expression of who you are and what you think and what you feel. This is time for you to express, and we're going to explore this artist and how he or she expressed and using this method, but then it's for you to express something that's important to you. You mentioned something as well about the digital versus the physical, and digital art is important and creative and interesting. But our children, particularly again, children spend a lot of time on the computers. playing games, working. If we think about the classroom, we have our interactive whiteboards. So how do you feel that art balances out that?
I mean, I don't want to give the impression that we're Luddites. We formed AccessArt in 1999, and at that time, I mean, it sounds crazy now, but there weren't actually that many websites. The reason we formed it is because we were trying to find information about how artists went into schools and ran workshops, because that's what we were doing, and we didn't have any experience. We'd had the art master's side, but we now have the education side. So we're quick to move into that digital space. We're definitely not Luddites, definitely not, and love using technology to make work. But at the same time, we've seen over the years that because of the lack of exposure, I think, to materials and tools in schools, and there's lots of reasons for that. You know, we've suddenly become very safety aware, which is good. Didn't exist when I was at school. It's good. Constraints on budget, constraints on timetabling, lots of different reasons that we have, I think, given, not in all schools, let me just make sure I'm clear about that. There's amazing teaching going on, but in many schools, less opportunity for children to experience physical things, especially as they go through the primary school. And so we notice when we go into schools that the year 6 children now, not in all schools, but in some schools, in many schools, definitely feel less dexterous to us than they were a few years ago. But alongside that, more frustrated, because the less practice they have with something, the more frustrating it is. It's frustrating anyway, because making sculpture is hard. Things fall over. You have an idea in your head and it doesn't look like it in reality. That's the process of doing it. That's what we always say. That's because you're doing it. It's not because you're bad at it. That's what it's like to do it. But, you know, even something like cutting, it happens quite a lot, doesn't it? Early years,
Yes.
early primary, and then it kind of gets cut out, literally cut out a little bit, because there's more important or more valued subjects perceived. So there is that lack of dexterity, and then we see that in secondary schools, it's passed on, and this isn't just us, this is what's been said. So lots of foundation courses say that they feel like they're having to do stuff that would have been done in sixth form. Lots of degree courses saying, because not as many are going on foundation, year 1 is not the same as it was before. So there's definitely an impact, and that's with the children that, again, the students that have chosen to do it. They still might never have threaded a needle, for example.
Wow.
Never mind the ones that haven't chosen art, which is absolutely fine, but you know, they may want to become dentist or whatever. I have a friend that teaches at Liverpool University in the vet school, and not only have they seen a lessening in dexterity skills, for whatever reason, and I include digital in that, you know, the first thing they do in the vet school course, year 1, is start to dissect cadavers. And they've never held a knife, because they're not allowed to hold a knife, but it means they don't know how much pressure you need to apply to that flesh. They struggle with it, and at the same time they can over recruit, if they needed to, students with 3 top level A levels. They have to find the differentiating factor between those pupils, and often the way they do that is ask them, well, what do you do in your spare time? And they, you know, the ones that are saying, you know, I crochet, or I knit, or I make pots, they're the ones with that tactile felt sense that the school is interested in. So this is important to all of us, I think, this felt sense. And then the other side of it, of course, is, which I think is so important, and I think for AccessArt, this is a real focus for us, this idea of felt sense. By felt sense, I mean what it feels like to work with materials, but also felt sense, listen to your intuition as well, which again isn't something that happens a lot in schools. But I think digital is so attractive. It's so slippy, isn't it? If we can do with a photograph very, very quickly, easily, it's so attractive. And then we give them the real world, and the messy clay, the cold clay, and wire that makes your fingers ache, and how do you connect these 2 bits of wood? It's hard, but it's also really good for us to go into that space of holding real materials and interacting with them. And I think I don't know if you've ever had that experience when you're in a room and you're all doing a making activity. It doesn't have to be high art. It could just be knitting or drawing or something, really, it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah,
But you're all doing it together. You're absorbed. Your hands are busy. Your head is busy, sort of, in the background.
yeah.
Your body's relaxing. Your whole nervous system's relaxing. The conversation's flowing back and forth.
Mm,
That's so good for us. That space is so, so good for us. And that connection to the real world is, I think, what we're going to have to literally grasp onto.
yeah.
The more we go down the AI route,
Yes.
the more I think the arts are weirdly going to become so important to us. I know there's a threat to arts and writing and illustrators especially, I think. But at the same time, if we can push ourselves into that sensory felt space of materials, I think we have to, for the sake of, as I said at the beginning, our humanity.
Yes, absolutely. And it was really interesting when you talked about the vets, and obviously surgeons would be in that same camp, but there are so many aspects of our life and careers, jobs that require these skills that I think it's just being overlooked for the academic, maths, English, science. Of course, they're all important, but it's that holistic education that we're looking for. And that's really my point about the creative arts, that we need them so much for more than we think about at the time. Not only is it good for our mental health, but actually in society, we need these skills. You said about connection there, being in a room with people who are creating something similar and relaxing and feeling a sense of connection and having conversations. I mean, that's just beautiful. But beyond that, we need those skills in ways that we perhaps haven't even imagined yet.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think there's there's a safety to art that is really important.
Mm,
I think that it creates a whole space around itself, whether it's the making of or the talking about it or the looking at it in a gallery or if it's in a public space and you're interacting with it. There's like a safe space around it,
mm,
isn't that? That's sort of created that allows you to say things
yeah.
in a kind of considered way. And I think it's another one of those skills that we can help pupils with in schools. I think through talking about art, what people mean by it, what their intention is, how I perceive it, how you perceive it, the fact that that's different. It's
Mm,
such a conversation. And by the word conversation, I don't just mean the oracy skills, I mean the whole thing of it,
the depth of it.
depth of it, and the different ways that that conversation manifests itself.
Yeah.
It's such a rich space, but it's such a safe space. And I think we are becoming increasingly fragmented. That's the way it feels, and contracted. And I
Mm,
think that's like, for many individuals, I think they feel a little bit contracted because you're in a state of, not everybody, I know, but lots of people seem to be in a state of, I don't know, anxiety or contraction. You're defensive. We're defensive about the world, I think, at the moment.
mhm.
Um, to go back to the idea of the art space as a bubble and that expansion, it's just the opposite state. If we can just give pupils doesn't even have to be long, just a 10, 15, 20-minute experience of just, I don't have to go through my school day feeling like I'm being measured, judged, watched. I can just relax, breathe, open out a little bit. It's a safe space to be in. And I think if we can give pupils practice to then know what it feels like to be in that slightly safer space and feel a little bit more understanding of difference, because we can talk about it and it's okay to talk about being different, that's fine, but we can talk about it in a different way. I think that's they're the other skills that art gives us.
And these are life skills, aren't they? I'm thinking as you're talking, I'm hearing this applying to so many other situations about acceptance and tolerance of difference and communicating effectively with one another and constructive criticism and all of those things that actually make the world go round, don't they?
Yeah, and they make the world go round and they make individuals' experience of being in the world so much better.
Mm.
I hesitate to say I don't think art can save us. But I do, as I get older, I do feel like it is so fundamental. And that, but it takes a long time to understand without feeling naive how important art is. I mean, yeah, I do understand that schools are pressured, and I know that lots of teachers, as we said earlier, haven't had a great art education themselves. Maybe they don't feel confident about their own creativity. I think it can be hard being a teacher and then, helping children facilitate that experience when you yourself haven't had it. But the most exciting teaching, I think, and we do see it a lot in schools using AccessArt, is where the teachers go from feeling like that, feeling scared to teach art or overwhelmed, or oh no, we've got to get everything out, it's going to be messy,
Yeah.
to experiencing it almost on the same level as the children. We say to teachers, just kind of, the thing you need to model is just curiosity and openness. You don't need to model, you don't need to pretend that you have some insight or knowledge. That's so empowering to children to know that the teacher's exploring too.
Yes.
And then when you get those teachers going through that process, letting go a little bit, and then understanding how that then makes them feel, and seeing the appetite created for more, and seeing the pride, and it's always the children, isn't it, that they think wouldn't have succeeded or paid attention because they don't normally in other subject areas. They pop up suddenly.
Well, you've reminded me of an activity I did quite some years ago now. We were looking at The Explorer by Catherine Rundell, and I decided to make some yarn birds. So the children were winding the yarn round and created these amazing little birds. And one child who, yeah, was often quite dysregulated in class stood up. He said, "Can you be quiet, the lot of you? I want to do this. I want to learn this." And I was really taken aback because, yes, he was not the child I thought would be interested in making yarn birds, but he really, really did get frustrated with the others because he actually did want to do it. And like you say, it was the physical, the hands-on, and they did produce some beautiful end products. They were all very different. They were varied in their beauty, if you like, but they really enjoyed the process. There was frustration. It took some longer than others, but it was a process that they went through. And the fact that this child was so invested was a real eye-opener and really beautiful, actually.
Yeah, I think we see that time and again. I think, and I hear teachers saying that as well. But you said something there about the frustration, and I think that is important. Can I just share a session we did? Well, two sessions in a particular school that always comes to mind. And they'd been studying the Anglo-Saxons,
Uh-huh.
and we'd been asked to go in and help them make some Anglo-Saxon inspired architecture.
Uh-huh.
Again, we did not make models of Anglo-Saxon architecture. Instead, what we did was get them to really look at the forms and the shapes in Anglo-Saxon architecture, and then we gave them a pile of materials, and then we just said, just come on, just make something inspired by that, make a creative response. I always think that phrase, make a creative response, is a really useful one to
That's lovely.
get pupils used to that so they understand it, because again, it opens them up, gives them freedom. So they had lots of materials, they'd done lots of drawing. We told them not to design on paper first, because we always say design through making, so that you don't get such a disparity between this imaginative but unrealistic design and then the materials. So they were going through this process, and all engaged, very lively classroom, the kind of classroom that some teachers would just be having a headache, I appreciate. Towards the end of the afternoon, there were children with the head in their hands. They were literally holding their head in their hands because they had poured so much energy into it. And it had got to that point that happens even when you're an adult sculptor, where it doesn't go well. It does not go well. It's part of the process. And they were embracing this so much. It was hard. They were tired. They needed a rest. It was hard on every level. The fingers were aching. Things weren't working out. And then, a bit of a rest, came back the next day, worked through it. In fact, we asked them to name their sculptures with a word. And without any prompt, they gave words like perseverance, because that's what they associated with that activity. But the thing about the frustration, I think, is, and it goes back to the well-being, I think we must never assume that whenever we give children a space to make work, it automatically puts them into a good space, because that doesn't happen with artists either. Like you said, there's lots of frustration, lots of searching. You sort of have to feel lost before you find the solution. So there's lots of potentially negative spaces to be in, but of value. That's the difference. I think they're of incredible value.
It's when you come out the other side, you realize that value, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, and I think we need to, I do like to talk about that with teachers and schools, that we can be, I think, more ambitious sometimes, more aspirational. We don't have to protect the children quite so much. We can stretch them, give them the freedom, let them go into that space in a very kind, nurturing way, because I think that is actually the space of making art. Making art isn't predefined and safe. It's never safe in that sense.
Yes.
Safe early. It's never safe as in we know the outcome. We never really know the outcome, and we never really know the journey.
I know what you mean. You're providing that safe environment, but you are encouraging children to take risks with their art and express themselves uniquely. That's so important.
Yeah. I think you can only take those creative risks when you do feel safe in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, you said a bit about how art has had an impact on your own life.
I think what art's offered me, I think my perception of what art has offered me has changed over times. And I love having, with age, it's one of those things. I love now having the experience to look back on it, because I think that gives a bit of insight. So when I look back on it, I think what art has given me is the ability to show who I was when I felt really quiet and couldn't show who I was in other ways. And it's definitely given me the ability to connect with other people. And that like has been a very practical thing, like manifesting itself in projects. So when I was 17, for example, my best friend was a dancer, a ballet dancer, and I was doing lots of photography at the time. So we kind of joined together. She would dance, I would take photographs, and then we'd sell them. So it gave me an opportunity to explore sort of coming into the world a little bit. And that's been really important to me. And the same with setting up Cambridge Sculpture Workshops and then AccessArt as an organisation in partnership with my friend Sheila Ceccarelli. So it's always been a connector, bringing people together. And when I look at the times when art has meant least to me, was ironically after I did my master's. And when I did my master's, it was at a stage, I think, at the Royal College of Art when it was quite competitive. It was kind of, the art scene was, I think, a little bit aggressive. It was young British artists, and it was kind of exciting, but also, you had to be a bit loud to be part of, I think. The work made at the Royal College was quite conceptual, and I wasn't really making conceptual work. I was literally feeling my way through making with my hands. So I felt a little bit out of place. But the thing that threw me most of all was that I felt that it had become such an intellectual exercise that whatever any of us made, and this is probably very unfair, but it felt at the time to me that whatever any of us made at the Royal College just didn't matter to anybody else. So when we came out of the Royal College, in fact, that was one of the main reasons we set our first organisation, Cambridge Sculpture Workshops. We felt like we needed to return to where we thought, or somehow help us find where we thought art connected to everybody else. And our solution there was to go back to children and making. So it's been a journey. It's almost been as if through enabling art in other people, in other children and adults, I finally talked myself back round into enabling and justifying making for myself. That's been a long journey, partly as well because I've had a child and I've had a slightly different focus, partly because all my creativity has been poured into AccessArt. It's an incredibly creative organisation. But it's taken a lot of years to recover from that Royal College of Art. And I think it's probably quite a common journey for some people. I think lots of artists do just carry on making, and I think lots maybe stop, they feel worn out. after college, and then you need to find your purpose, the reason you want to make art. And what I've realized, the great privilege of being older, is that I've taken the pressure off. I don't have to make art and imagine it in a gallery and worry about all that.
Yes.
And so what I'm left with is just making art for that time when I'm in the space making art. That's all I really care about, because now I can feel where I am in that space. And I bet if I measured my blood pressure, it would go down when I'm in that space.
Yes, that would
I
be
know
interesting.
it would. I know it's a good space for me to be in.
Yeah.
And it matters to me what I make. It definitely matters to me what I make in a artist headspace. I kind of care. I'm passionate. I know when it's gone wrong or right, but I don't so much worry about what other people think about it anymore. Which again, I guess has parallels in school, doesn't it? Because until we can provide space in school for art lessons to be that free for everybody,
Yes.
without that marking,
Mm.
that fatal creative marking that puts so many people off,
Yeah, definitely.
then I don't think we've quite got it sussed.
Yeah. And I think you talked about connection. I would say almost every, if not every guest that's come onto the podcast has talked about connection in some way. And I think if we don't have those opportunities, those creative opportunities for connection, then I'd ask listeners to reflect on what we have in its place. It's so important that I think when COVID hit and we were all isolated, a lot of us felt that things would change and we would strive to be more connected to one another. And I think to a certain degree, a lot of us were. But then when you think about the school curriculum and the opportunities for connection through the arts, as I say, if we don't have that, then we have that disconnect. And I think we go back again to the mental health, mental well-being. It's really important that we help our young people to connect with one another in positive ways. And if the arts can do that, then why are we not giving them a higher profile, I guess?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's really well said.
Do you have a particularly memorable art lesson from your own schooling or one that you've taught? Anything that really stands out for you?
Yeah, well, so I grew up in Sheffield. My primary school was a very modern 1970s primary school. It had curtains instead of doors, which I still think's quite cool. Obviously, lots of the work then was project based. So all my memories of great art lessons are from that school. It changed quite dramatically when I went to secondary school till
Oh,
later on. But so there were things like, we did a Stone Age project.
hmm,
So we were tasked with, I just find this so unlikely now, which is what I find quite interesting. At the time, 1970, whatever, we were tasked with making a needle from a piece of bone.
wow.
I know. So I don't know where the bones came from. I don't know what kind of bones they were. We were meant to, with another needle or sharp device, make a hole in the top of the bone, thread something through it, and then see if we could get this bone needle through a piece of hessian. And when we said to the teacher, there were only a few of us doing it, we must have been specially chosen. When we said to the teacher we can't do it, she just said, "Oh, okay, that's fine." But we sort of tried, which I find really encouraging.
Yeah.
So that sticks in my memory. My mom and dad were very, because I had so much time at school, they were very good at encouraging me. And of course, the library played such an important part in my life in the 70s. Every
Yeah.
Saturday, go to the library, children's library. I got out a book on beading, and it showed me how to make a little tiny loom out of a matchbox.
Oh, wow.
And the school was, no, my maths is terrible. America was celebrating Independence Day in a major way. Don't know what year that would have been. So of course, this school in a village in Sheffield was also celebrating American Independence Day. I
Of
have no
course.
idea why, but I didn't question that at the time. And I made at home a little woven bead. I don't know what it was, just a little flat piece of weaving. which of course was like the weaving that Native American Indians might have made to decorate their clothes. And I took it in to show my teacher, and she asked me to go and take it around all the classes. She was so pleased with it. So that was a highlight for me. And then we were invited to bring in our dad's shirts. Again, it had to be our dad's shirts because that was the era. I didn't think mom would wear a shirt like that. Dad's shirts that we could cut and paint. I loved that because, gosh, you can take a shirt, you can cut it up, you can paint on it, and you've made something else.
Yeah.
How exciting is that? So they're my real memories. That, and also one last one, which again came from a library book, was literally digging up the soil in the garden. We lived in quite a clay area, putting it in a bucket, letting it settle, getting the clay bit at the bottom. Again, my mum got some plaster from somewhere. I made a plaster bat because the library book said you need to dry your clay on the plaster bat, and made something with this clay that had no plasticity, wouldn't hang together, but had come out of the garden.
Wow.
So that's kind of, and I feel like that's where I'm at now. I get very excited by the idea that the world, and I think lots of artists feel like this, that the world is full of materials and visual symbols, and now with the internet, of course, we've got presented with images every day of things made thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
All these things are the things that we as artists, as sensitive people, can be drawing upon to put through our bodies, let our senses fall in them and come out as something else. Doesn't really matter what it is, it's just a processing.
Yes.
And while we process those materials, and while we process those ideas, and while we process those things we've collected like magpies, we are processing emotions without the pressure of having to process our emotions. It's not happening, it's just happening as we do it. And I just love that. I love the fact that there's a whole world out there that we as artists can transform. And that, I think, is the empowerment we need to give children.
I was going to go on to ask what's next for you, but can you talk a little bit about AccessArt for us? What is it and why should we be more aware of it?
Yeah, so AccessArt started out as an organisation, a web-based organisation, where our aim was, Sheila and myself, we were working in museums and galleries as artists. We'd go into schools and museums and galleries, and we'd take our skills as artists and work with these children. And there were two reasons we began AccessArt. One was we felt like we'd quite like to know what other artists did in that environment, because we didn't go on a course to learn that. So we thought, well, are we doing it right? You know, what do other people do? So we thought we'd like to know what other people were doing. And also, we really felt that when we went into the schools and did those workshops, it was great for those children involved. It didn't have longevity. So we had the idea of sharing experiences that we thought were really good. So if we went into a school or worked with a gallery and did what we thought was a successful session, we began to share it on AccessArt with text and image. And then we invited other artists, artist educators, to share their ideas so that we could have a little look at what they were doing, with the idea that over time we'd create a pot of inspiration that everyone could look at and go, oh, there's an interesting idea, it's a different approach.
Yeah.
So it started there back in 1999, and then it's taken a lot of years, but now there's like nearly 2,000 resources on the site.
Wow.
And lots of them are created by ourselves as a result of teaching that we've done in different settings. Lots of them are created by other artist educators. So it's a real melting pot. And the idea has always been, we're always been interested in transferability. So we'd just come out of art school. We thought, well, what's the best bits of art school are often those workshops that you do or you've been to. Why can't those kind of workshop approaches, which are always exploratory, why can't we do them in primary school? You know, why can't we swap between settings? So we've always made sure that the resources on the site are very adaptable.
Yeah.
For years and years and years, I think we were just known as a resource bank for passionate teachers, art teachers, and for artist educators. And then we began to realise that lots of schools where the teachers were newly qualified or weren't interested in art didn't want to go near AccessArt because it was a bit scary, which I appreciate. It was, in terms of its open-endedness. So we spent lots of time pulling resources together to create what we called our primary art curriculum. So for early years foundation stage, key stage 1 and 2. And what we tried to do there was make a balance between pulling resources together in what we call a pathway.
Yeah.
So a pathway is a block of work for 6 weeks, for half a term, around a certain exploration, in such a way that we weren't squashing it. We didn't want to we wanted to make it usable for less specialist teachers, but we didn't want to lose any of the aspiration, and we didn't want to lose any of the open-endedness and the journey that we've been talking about. So I think we've been really successful in that. So we created this very exciting curriculum, and it's, we have to remember when we teach art in schools, it's art, craft and design.
Yes.
And within each of those areas, they also just expand into lots of other areas. There's limits to what we can do in school, but what we've tried to do with the primary art curriculum is make sure that we always say that by the end of year 6, we like children to kind of have found one area that they're really passionate about. So, there's lots of different disciplines and art forms in there, lots of artists from different backgrounds, lots of different ways of thinking about art, realizing that it's about our bodies as well as, the materials. So I think it's been really successful. We've got thousands of schools using that now. And what's really exciting for us is that they all have different results, and they all are learning as they go along. They're learning to adapt. We do lots of CPD teacher training. There's lots of pedagogy resources on the site. We had a meeting with Ofsted, and this is a couple of years ago, and they wanted us to kind of help teachers understand why they were doing the activities that we suggested and why they were doing the approach that we suggested. So we kind of developed the pedagogy side and shared that. And actually that's been really successful. I think teachers like understanding more, because isn't there a statistic about teacher training about many teachers having just 1 or 2 hours to specialize in art in their entire teacher training? So that's what we've done with AccessArt, and it's still a resource bank of things that sit outside the curriculum. So like there's a drawing journey, there's a sketchbook journey. We're just trying to create energy, and I think momentum and confidence, and remember that art in schools should be really fun. It delivers the national curriculum. It delivers more than. It's more aspirational than. It's beyond. So you're more than delivering the national curriculum. It's about ambition and aspiration for everybody. And we definitely know when we've done our sort of research that it doesn't leave any children behind. It is not true that if we become more aspirational for art in the school, it somehow means excluding somebody. It's not true. It's really not true. So it brings everybody along, raises everybody. And it's been really good for raising enthusiasm and passion.
It sounds brilliant. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So anybody thinking, yeah, I'm not an art specialist, but I want to have a look, or any art leaders as well wanting to develop art within their school can go on there and have a look. And anybody beyond the classroom as well, working in museums or so forth, can access that. So thank you. So what's next for either AccessArt or yourself, Paula Briggs? What's next?
What's next? I'm very good at new things. I get swept along with a new idea, and then luckily there's a team now. There's a whole team behind AccessArt, so they can pick up the idea and make it happen. But I think what suits, we don't have a plan. We've never had a long-term plan. And where I get fired up, and I think it's always important to follow that energy and enthusiasm and passion, is in responding, and I guess this is my creativity, is in responding to the place we are at. So AccessArt has always invented itself on the spot, if you like, and that doesn't mean to say we keep reinventing ourselves. We're actually doing what we intended to do, but we just keep doing it in a deeper and richer way, and hopefully with more people. So I don't know what's next. I don't know where we'll be in 2 years' time, for example, but in the immediate future, I think it is a focus on the idea of felt sense. So returning to working with materials, because I think for many it is a return or the first time. It's not that it's been going on continuously. So it's about that felt sense, and that's in terms of our intuition and in terms of making as well. AccessArt is such a huge site, thousands of resources. It can be overwhelming. And what I would really, really like for teachers and for artists and for all users as well, home users, is that when they access the site, they feel like it's a calm place. And there's videos that are showing calm activities that say, oh, actually, you know what? I might go and dig some soil out of the garden. It might be just what I need to do today. I want us to use the digital to remind people that the physical world is beautiful and can help them slow down. So that's our challenge, is how do we hold all this information in this massive site, which we're forever battling with the navigation to try and help teachers find things. How can they go there, not be overwhelmed, but be calmed and inspired to go off into the real world? That's our challenge, I think.
Wow, that sounds wonderful. Really succinctly put there, Paula. Thank you. And who else, sort of passionate about the arts, would you like to hear on Creative Minds Shaping the Future, and why?
Oh, well, I'm going to give you a name that, gosh, if you could get this name, I'd be so thrilled. I'm going to give you Brian Eno. Whenever I listen to Brian Eno talk, I feel very inspired. I feel very sort of safe. In fact, we had to get some aprons printed for a workshop, and I chose a quote of his, which I'm going to get wrong right now, but it was something like, if we want to change the world, we need to start making it right now. I've had this feeling a little while, and I don't want this to sound unfair, but I do feel like in the visual arts, it would be great if visual artists, and I know Brian, isn't just a visual artist, but if visual artists that are doing it and have somehow survived and are somehow still managing to do it, would help join this voice that we need to advocate for the need for the arts further down the school. It happens a little bit. There are people that do it, but I think we could do with a few more voices. Visual arts of all stages in their careers. They don't have to be, top of the game or whatever, but that can articulate and verbalize why art's important to them, why art gave them their voice, why art's saving them every day as they turn up. It must be to lend their voice back down. That connection again, going back down. It's not just a pipeline in one direction. And I think the reason I'm a little bit sensitive about that is my Royal College experience, is this idea of artists in an ivory tower. We've got beyond that. We don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
So any visual artist that can express, or any artist in any art form can express why art is saving them every day, why they turn up, that can maybe lend their voice, I think.
Well, Paula, we've reached the end of our discussion on this occasion, but thank you so, so much. I loved some of the phrases that you mentioned when talking so passionately about art and doing and being. Lifting the lid on children's thinking was just one of them. Thinking about how the art space should feel very different to all the other subjects, and learning through art as well as about art. Some really profound statements that you made today, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed that. I hope they'll go on to look at AccessArt and be inspired. And yes, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much. I've loved every minute of it. My favourite subject, and thank you for inviting me.
I hope Paula's episode has given you the opportunity for contemplation about how we learn through art as well as about art, allowing our bodies and minds the space to respond to the materials without knowing the outcome. In the next episode, I speak to Claire Sundin from Embracing Arts. Claire has worked as a professional actor across the UK, in the West End and New York, and she's the artistic director of Embracing Arts. Here she is with a few words.
We use all of our senses to try and create theatre, and that's not just using the 5 senses that we sort of all know about. We actually have, I think, around 33 senses. Everyone can have a theatrical experience. We might communicate differently, we might express ourselves differently, but that doesn't matter because the creativity is like a universal language. The creative world is unlimited.
If you're following this podcast from the start, I hope you've enjoyed listening to Series 1. If you're a new listener, welcome and thank you for joining us. In Series 1, we asked, does creativity have a place in education? In Series 2, we explore creative expression and why it is important for us all. In this series, I speak to painters, sculptors, musicians and dancers, to name a few creative disciplines. I already have more fantastic guests lined up for Series 3 and 4, where I'll be talking with inspiring individuals with a range of experience. If this sounds like you, maybe you have a view on creative thinking or creative expression, please get in touch by following me at ACPC4A, the number 4, on X, or Emma Palastanga on LinkedIn to connect. There are many ways you can support the show for free, and it's much appreciated. Share with your contacts, rate the show, or leave a review. If you like, you can buy me a virtual coffee to help with the costs of the podcast platform. Please follow this podcast so that you can stay up to date on the release of each episode. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next episode of Creative Minds Shaping the Future.